Hey, grade sevens, this is Mrs. Nickel. Um, this is kind of weird doing this, but we're gonna see how it goes and try. I'm here in the classroom at school just for today, and we want to start learning about ecological footprints. So I'm using Google Meet at the moment. This is a great way for us to also get together and talk to each other if you need to see me face to face and want to ask some questions. Let me know by email if I need to contact you. But I'm going to try by going to present now, and I'm going to show you a slideshow and kind of talk in the background, and hopefully this works. So I'm going to show you this slideshow here, and we're going to start from the beginning. But before we start, I want to acknowledge Tim Turner of the Sea to Sky Outdoor School in BC. That's where I got most of this information that the lesson's based on. And he shared these ideas in a manual called Teaching Green the Middle Years. So hopefully you already watched the short video that gave you a bit of information about what an ecological footprint is. And before we start talking about ecological footprints, we need to step back a little bit. And we're going to talk about some numbers about resources we have here on Earth. So first of all, you need to know what a hectare is because we're going to talk about hectares as a unit of area. And I actually just learned this the other day. I didn't know that an acre actually was a unit of measurement, and it represents 100 meters squared. So an area that you can see on your screen that is 10 meters by 10 meters would be called an acre. That would be the area found inside 100 meters squared. Now, if you have a hect of them, which means 100, if you were to have 100 acres, you would have a hectare. And that is an area that is 100 meters by 100 meters for a total of 10,000 meters squared. So when we talk about hectares, that's the area or the unit of area that we're talking about. And just so you can visualize what a hectare is, it's about the size of a grassy area that would be inside a 400-meter running track. So if you've ever ran the 400 meters and you can picture that track and how long it takes you to get around, all of the area inside of that is about 1 hectare. Okay, now we need to talk about our living earth, and there's this term called biologically productive, and that just means the amount of land or water that's available on our planet that provides us with all the food, all the water, and all the materials that we need to be able to live and survive. And so if we broke down the Earth's surface, actually about 39 billion hectares is not biologically productive for us. So we actually can't use it. This includes a lot of the ocean. It includes things like paved parking lots or the tops of mountains where you can't really grow anything. And so biologically productive areas on Earth only make up about 12 billion hectares, which is still a good size compared to the land that we live on, but it is less than a quarter of Earth's surface. Um, if we break it down even a little bit more, so the oceans and water sources are about 72%. 68% of it is unproductive, and 4% is ocean, where we get about 95% of our fish from. In terms of the land, land makes up about 28%. So that's when you take out all the lakes and rivers and things like that. But even out of that, 9% of that land includes things like deserts, things that are not very useful for us to grow and get resources from. So only 19% of that land is actually biologically productive for us. So this should be a bit of a reminder of what we talked about at Journey 2050. You saw a graph or a breakdown very similar to this when we were there. So in summary, about 23% of our surface in total, if we go back to this slide, is really available for us for pro- being biologically productive. And don't forget, we have to share this biologically productive land with about 10 million or so other species that live on the planet. So humans are not the only ones here. So, according to Tim Turner, there are three facts and one inescapable conclusion that we kind of have to come to. So, if we look at this information again, remember that about 12 billion hectares of earth are biologically productive. So, even though there's about 51 billion hectares on Earth's surface, we can only really get the resources we need from about 12 billion of those. The human population back in 2017 was about 7.53 billion, and it's still going up from there. But if we divide this, we come up with an average Earth share per person. So, how much Earth is really available if we all divided it out equally among us? And that would give us about 1.6 hectares. Now, of course, we know that's not the way the Earth is divided up right now. I mean, we don't all have equal shares, but it is something to think about for us that if we are using a much bigger share than someone else, that is going to have an impact on how long our resources are going to last. And then this whole issue of sustainability. So the other thing we have to take in mind or take into account is that the average earth share is actually declining every year. So as we use more land for urbanization to build cities and homes, that uses potentially less land for resources. If there are poor farming practices or agricultural practices, which it could include overgrazing grazing by livestock, could include deforestation. Sometimes there's toxic contamination from getting rid of products that we don't need anymore, desertification, and global climate change. Those can all affect the amount of land that's available for resources that we need to live. And so we need to start thinking about the idea that less is more. Can we do with less? Can we actually shrink our footprint, the kind of resources that we need in order to live? Because otherwise, we might have to consider something like finding another Earth to inhabit. Because if we all continue to grow in our need for resources, this might be a place that we end up. So you've already hopefully seen this diagram in the notes. The ecological footprint measures how fast we consume resources. It talks about the load or demand that we place on Earth's resources. And it really is a measure of how much of Earth's biologically productive land and water that we need to produce our food, material goods, and energy, and to absorb our waste. Okay, so all of those things have to be taken into account. And so when we're talking about our ecological footprint, we need to ask ourselves the following questions. So, first of all, how much water do you use in a typical day? How much do you eat? And what kind of things do you eat? How much food do you waste? How much ends up in the garbage? How do you transport yourself? And how far do you go? How much clothing and footwear do you have? And how often do you replace it? How do you replace it? What and how much stuff do you buy? How much energy and materials are required to keep you dry, so to shelter you, to keep you warm and cool inside your house? How much garbage do you produce? And how much land and energy do you use for your recreational activities? Are you involved in a sport or something that requires a building, a swimming pool, facilities? All of those things are a part of your lifestyle. And they're an indication of the habits that you have in consuming goods and services that the earth provides to you on a daily basis. So now the next step for you is to fill in and complete the personal eco footprint calculator to estimate how much land you need to support your lifestyle. Now, you can either print this off, that's fine. If you have a printer, you can do that. A file is attached in D2L. Or you can just look at the screen and just write your answers down on a separate sheet of paper. That's actually what I did because I didn't have a printer at home either that I had access to at the moment. So I just wrote my answers down on a sheet of paper and tallied my score. So I haven't shown the full picture here. You're going to have to use the file that's provided in D2L. Now, the results may surprise you, but I think it's important to start thinking about how your personal choices have an impact on more than just yourself and more than just your immediate family. Now, here's a few things you're going to have to think about before you complete the calculator. So, first of all, the calculator is divided into 8 categories that represent the many ways that we consume nature every day. Now, it's not supposed to be a scientific survey. It's not going to be a perfect measure of exactly all of the resources you use, but it should give you a pretty good approximation of the impact that you have on a typical day. Now, we've got a little bit of a choice here with this whole isolation and quarantining with COVID. In fact, we actually are having probably a lower ecological footprint. So you can decide whether you want to do these results based on what you're currently using or based on what your kind of typical lifestyle was before. It's your choice because we know that we won't always be in the same state forever. So you can decide kind of how you want to consider what your day to day activities are like for the eco footprint calculator. Um, if anything, chances are we're going to simplify and underestimate the amount of resources that we actually use. And I understand that a lot of these factors are out of your control, but they do still represent your lifestyle at the present moment. So you can use these results as a baseline. And then when you get older, you're going to start making more of these choices on your own. And you might take some of these things into account when you're making your own decisions. So now it's going to be time. Let me just see if I can get out here. Okay, now it's going to be time for you to go and complete your own personal footprint calculator using the file that I provided to you in D2L. So like I said before, I just I just wrote mine out on a sheet of paper. I know you can't read this, it's backwards, but you don't have to print it out. You can just write your answers on a sheet of paper and at the very end come up with a tally and come up with the result for how much of your uh, earth share you really use. And then we're going to have some follow-up activities after that. So good luck. Go complete your survey. Ask your parents for help if you need, and I'll see you later.